Have you ever wanted to create a space scene, something similar to this within Inkscape? Well, in today's video, I'm going to show you how. Hello my friends, Rob here from Button Press Graphics, back with another Inkscape tutorial, and today I'm going to be showing you how you can create something along these lines, a space scene. Now of course you would be forgiven for thinking that a space scene is something that is way too complex to create in Inkscape, but you would be wrong, because using the power of filters it becomes very easy. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now when I created the space scene that you can see on screen right now, I did so using nothing more than filters and gradients with a few shapes. So as you can see on screen, I have now got a background already created. Now this, as you can see, is just a simple black shape with a radial gradient. And if I open up my fill and stroke menu using this button on the right hand side here, as you can see, these are the settings that I have got for that gradient. When it comes to creating a kind of nebula in the background, I used one of the filters that I've used many times on this channel, the watercolor filter, because it is really cool and it gives you a good effect. But in order to create the shapes, we need to use our pen tool, which is found right here on the left hand side. Giving that a select or pressing B on the keyboard, we can create a random shape here that we can then move along over the top. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to give us more of a Batman kind of symbol. So it comes across, dips down in the middle, across again with a point on each end. And just so you know, when you see me just select off it like this, it's so I can get a point on the next corner. So when I come over here and I click this, I can then start again. Now the way I do this is just by clicking and dragging to get a curve. I will do something like that, and as you can see with the red line, it automatically continues that curve into my next node. But if you don't want it to do that and you want to have a point, you can just right click or press enter. This will temporarily end the selection, and then you can select the node again and of course connect it just like this. Now this doesn't look like much, but this is all we need. We don't need anything really outlandish or anything like that. Now with this done, I'm just going to change this to white, and I'm going to turn off the stroke by holding shift and pressing the red X. We now have our shape, and if we go back to our select tool, we can shift this over the top and position it to where we want. Now of course I don't want it to be completely straight, I want it to be kind of skewed slightly, so I'm going to select it again to get the rotation handles, and now I'm just going to rotate it ever so slightly like this, and I'm going to make sure that this part here where the gap in between the top and the bottom is the shortest, I'm going to try and get that in the middle of the canvas, something around there. Now with that done, I'm going to create another shape which is very similar to it, but I am also going to make sure that I use a linked offset. Now in order to do that, I am going to keep this object selected, go to path, come down to linked offset, give that a click. I don't want to increase it a lot, just slightly like so. Now as I highlight over, you can see the gap in between. That is the original piece that has been left untouched. You can change the color so it's easier to see as well, but what you're looking for is two more shapes. So you're looking for this white piece and then two extra shapes as well. So with this one done, I'm going to go to path, object to path. Now with the grey selected, I am going to go to path and linked offset again. And I'm just going to repeat what we previously did. Increase it slightly. I'm going to change the color, and I'm going to make sure that this goes path, object to path. And now we have 3 separate shapes, all of varying sizes. Well, this is where the magic starts to happen, because now we are going to start adding our filters. So in order to do that, we need to come to filters and then enter the filter gallery, which is this option right on the top. Once it opens, you will find it on the right hand side, and with all filters selected on the left, I'm going to come to this bar right here. Now we're going to search for a filter that I've used many times on this channel already. It's the watercolor filter, and there it is. Now by selecting the watercolor, we get this kind of effect. Now we want this to be quite far. We want this to spread out quite a bit. And in order to do that, you're going to need to go to your fill and stroke menu. You can find your fill and stroke menu on the right hand side right here if you haven't got it open already. But I have, so I'm going to select it from the top. And now I'm going to choose my colors. Now when it comes to the color choice, you want to try and make the nebula part of this picture very similar colors. You want to keep it from the same section. So if you want a more warm color tone, then you're going to go red, orange, yellows, maybe a little bit of a lime green. But like I did in my previous attempt, I used a light blue and then a dark purple and a little bit of a fuchsia as well. So I'm going to go around this kind of group here again. I'm going to use a very bright purple, something like this. That looks really good to me. And by default, this is going to start a blur of around 24, normally around 22 to 25. I'm going to increase that significantly so we can get much more of a wider effect like this. And I want to reduce the opacity of this. I do not want it to be as vivid as everything else. I want it to be kind of subtle. So I'm going to change this. I'm going to bring this down to around 60. That looks around perfect to me. Now I'm just going to repeat this same process, but change the color for the next 2 shapes. And there you go, just like that, you now have something that looks a little bit more like a nebula, but you can go a little bit further if you want. Now this is open to interpretation. This is something that you can do just for you. And what I'm on about is using the blend modes. Now if you want to select between the 3, you can either open up your layers menu with this button right here, or you can simply hold Alt on your keyboard and select whichever one you want. And if you want to know which one you currently have selected, because it's hard to tell sometimes with this filter put on, you can see down in the bottom. So as you can see at the moment, I have the pink one or the fuchsia one selected. But if I hold Alt and I press again, you can see I've selected the background, and again hold Alt, select, and I will select this topmost one, which is the light blue. Again underneath that the dark blue, and then back to the fuchsia. So you get how it will work. It will just cycle through them until you can select the one that you want. And I think lighten is actually pretty good. So I'm going to stay with that just like this. And I'm also going to reduce just ever so slightly the way the blur looks, because I think that that's not enough really. And I think that's about right. Something that looks like that looks really good to me. But now we move on to the next step, the planet, which you'd be forgiven for thinking that it is very, very difficult. But again, using filters, not so much. In order to create the planet, I am just going to use some circles. So go to my circle and ellipses tool right here on the left hand side, and then I'm just going to create a circle in the center. Now you don't want this to be too big, but I am holding Control and Shift to lock the proportions and make sure it's a perfect circle. And next, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be making sure that this has full opacity and it is dead center of the image. Now you can do that by using your Align and Distribute menu, which can be found on the right hand side here. And then I'm going to go straight up to the top where it says last selected. I'm going to make sure page is selected, and then I'm going to hit these two buttons right here. This is going to center it up on the vertical and horizontal axis. But for now, what we need is the color from around the nebula. And this is going to be used as a background blur. As you can see on the image that I created previously, I used a lilac blur because there was a lilac in the actual nebula. Now, of course, that means that when I create that glow around it, it ties everything together. It makes things a whole lot more cohesive. So that's what we're aiming for. But before we do that, I am going to convert this to a path by going path, object to path, and then I'm going to duplicate, which is right click and select duplicate. Now, as you can see, if we was to shift this away, we have two copies. Now this one I am going to be using as the blur. So for this one, I'm going to use my fill and stroke menu, and I'm just going to add a blur to it. This doesn't have to be perfect. And I am also going to use this dropper tool. I do not think the blur will look as good as if I used one of the background colors instead. So I'm going to go with this, and then I can possibly lighten that up. And then I'm going to select this other circle that I duplicated, making sure that I use the Align and Distribute menu to align it up. And as you can see, it now has that very subtle glow. If you want, you can also reduce the size ever so slightly if you think it needs to be reduced. But for now, I'm just going to leave it as is because I think that looks good. If I was to deselect everything, you can see the glow takes a really good effect. Now with this one, I'm going to turn it black. And again, next we are going to duplicate one more time. Now with this duplicate, as you can see, it still looks black. So we are going to use our fill and stroke menu to add a gradient. Now this gradient can be any two colors that you want, but you will want to make it a contrasting color in comparison to anything that is around it. So I'm going to use this one. This is the start point. I'm going to move that up to the top. I'm going to use the finish point down at the bottom right, just like so. And let's choose two different colors. Now, of course, we need this one to be fully opaque. So I'm going to turn the alpha bar right up to the top. And then I'm going to use something like yellow and red to give that very different feel to the rest of the image. So there's the yellow, and now I'm going to select red and turn these bars up. Then we can start to tweak just how dark it is and just how much saturation we have. Now I'm going to leave the saturation up quite high, but I'm going to darken it quite a lot. But for the red and for the yellow, I'm going to do the same actually. I'm going to lower the brightness and not as much saturation. Somewhere around there looks pretty good to me. Now with this one, I am going to reduce the size. Holding Shift and Control, I just want to get a very slight rim around the edge. Something like this. Now we can obviously tweak that later if we don't like it, but for now that will be perfect. And I'm going to go back to my filters gallery, and this time I'm going to be looking for a different filter. The filter we're going to be looking for this time is enamel jewelry. There we go, and this is the one we're looking for. Give that a double click and you will get this kind of effect. Now again, this is open to interpretation. You can move this as much as you want. You can have the gradient going in the opposite direction if you so choose. So you can have a red side and a bright side like so. But once you get it looking exactly how you would like it, we can then right click, duplicate, and this time we're going to come to our filters menu, go down to the bottom, remove the filter to get back to this. Now I'm just going to add that as a black shape, and I'm going to again increase the size so it covers the planet. Now once I've got it exactly where I want it, I'm coming back to my fill and stroke menu, and again we are going to add another radial gradient. Now by default this is going to make your black circle have a black center and a transparent outer rim. So we want to reverse that. We want to select this button right here, and that will give us an outer rim and a transparent circle in the middle. However, we are not done. We also want to make that black rim quite a lot thicker. So I'm going to do this. Not much, I'm just going to move it in enough to get that kind of effect. And with that done, we can now go back onto our canvas and move the center point or the focal point of our planet. And then let's say we move it this way so it's top left. We can stretch this out slightly. And just like that, we now have a shadow from the planet. And it is really that simple. We have now created a planet very, very quickly. And finally, the last step is to add a little bit of polish. Now, in order to do this, we are going to use lots of varying different size circles. And this is going to help us to create the effect of some stars. So in order to do this, we are going to simply create a star using our circle and ellipses tool. I'm going to create one right here. It doesn't matter about the size as long as you create a circle that is symmetrical. And then I'm going to add a little bit of a blur onto it. Something around there seems about right to me, around 40%. And then I'm going to go path, object to path. Next, I'm going to use my select tool, reduce the size so it's very, very small. And now it is simply a case of selecting it. And as you can see, when I have it selected and you can move it around, you have the little icon that appears next to the cursor. If it's not big enough, then you might just have to increase it ever so slightly so it's easier to select. But once you do, you can select and drag it around. And while you are moving it and dragging it around with the mouse, hit the space bar to create lots of little stars. Now, once you have all the stars that you want to create, you need to vary the size. The size is not always going to be exactly the same. So what you need to do is simply go to each one and reduce the size, maybe increase the size, and sometimes even just increase or decrease the blur. So We can go down with this one and then increase the blur, come back out and select the next. Now this is a little bit tedious to do, but it will be worth it in the end. Now, of course, you can add as many stars as you want, especially if you add varying sizes and blurs. Is going to make it look a whole lot better in the long run. But, of course, with the more stars you add, the more strain it will put on your hardware. So it's just something to keep in mind. But once you have created all the stars that you want, there are only a couple more steps that you can do to add some extra little polish parts. Now what I want to do next is I want to use my circle and ellipses tool, and I'm going to create another little circle. One just like this. Now with this circle, I am going to place this around here. I want to make it right near the outskirts of the nebula. I do not want to have it up near the edges of the picture. I just want it around these parts. So there would be good, here would be good, there, but not over the top of the nebula either. So even here would be good, around here, here. You get the general idea. So let's go with here to begin with. Now this circle, I'm going to use another filter onto it, because this is going to add another layer of polish to the entire image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my filters gallery. I'm going to select the search box, and this time I'm going to search for ink bleed. And there it is, previously selected anyway. So I'm going to give that a double click, and as you can see, we get this kind of effect. It keeps the main circle, but it also gives this little bleed effect coming away from it. Now by going to our fill and stroke menu, we can reduce or add to this ink bleed. And if you want to make it way more profound, you can add the ink bleed again. And as you can see, it will extend it outwards even more. And again, and you see the effect that it keeps having. So let's just take that back one step. Now what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to change the color. So using my dropper tool by pressing D on the keyboard, I can get back to this dropper tool, and I'm going to select this color here from the nebula. And there you go. We now have something that looks like it's part of the nebula. Except with this one, we are able to create another circle that goes over the top. So let's get the color correct. Something around there is good. And now I'm going to create another circle. And I'm going to make sure that this one is white as well. And then using my select tool, I'm going to bring it over to the original circle that was underneath with the filter on it. And then using my fill and stroke, I'm going to add a blur to it. And now it looks like it's part of the same nebula. Like the nebula is reflecting light away from it, as you can see. And now I'm going to do that a few more times. And when that's done, finally you've got one more step, and that's to add a few shooting stars. Now how many you add is completely up to you, but there is a very simple way of making them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another circle simply like this, and I can make it big so it's easier for you to see, but it doesn't really need to be very big. As long as you go to path, object to path, and then go to your node tool, you will have the 4 nodes, one on the top, the bottom, the left and the right, of course. Now all I'm going to do is just take the right node, hold Control and pull that all the way out. So you get a long shape looking something like this. Now all I'm doing is I'm just shifting this handle so it's more of a point, but it doesn't really matter because we will be blending this side out. Now what I'm going to do with this is add a linear gradient. So I'm going to click this linear gradient and automatically it will start to fade out towards the right. And now I'm going to give it a little bit of a blur, but not much, around 10% will do. And now using my select tool, I can take this over the top of the image, reduce the size, and I can also shorten it like this if I think it's too thick, which I do. I think something more like that is better. And I'm going to select it again to get the rotation handles up, just so I can make it look a little bit better like that. Now I'm going to just press the space bar and have a group of them like this. And then I can come up to the top and do the same up here as well. And I can get rid of that one, don't need that anymore. And then the last step is simply to select all 3 and then duplicate. And with the duplicate selected, I'm going to add a lot of blur to them. And again with this one, we are going to duplicate and add more of a blur. And then you have your picture. Something that looks a little bit like this. So that's how you can make your very own starry scene. And it is really very easy to do. And just keep tweaking around with the colors, tweaking around with all the different methods that you've seen me using in today's video. And let's see what you can come up with yourself. Did you know that you can become a member of the Button Press Graphics YouTube channel? Well, now you do. You will get a lot of added benefits and you will directly support the channel, enabling me to make much better content in the future. Also, you can send in your artwork into the Creative Corner. This is a regular section where I will showcase your work in a future video. But for now, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I'm going to bid you all a fond farewell and I will see you next time.